A narrow stone passage under the Palatine Hill. January, AD 41. Above ground, Rome is celebrating days of games and sacrifices to a living god. Below ground, walking home alone through a corridor barely wide enough for two men, is the god himself. A Praetorian officer steps into his path. One question, the watchword for the night. The emperor starts to answer. The officer's sword comes down between his collarbone and his neck. The emperor of Rome, a living god by his own decree, ruler of the known world, falls to the stone floor of a service corridor and screams that he is still alive. They stab him 29 more times to make sure he isn't. The man who struck first was a soldier the emperor had spent 4 years mocking. Not for cowardice he'd shown in battle. He'd never shown any. The emperor mocked him for his voice. To understand how a joke about a man's voice ended an empire's third reign, you have to go back to who Cassius Chaerea actually was. Caligula never bothered to find out. By AD 41, Caligula had stopped pretending to be an ordinary emperor. He had declared himself Jupiter, ordered a temple built for his own worship, and appointed a priest whose only job was tending his cult. That priest was a horse. Its name was Incitatus, and there were rumors around the palace that Caligula meant to make it a consul next. Nobody laughed at that where he could hear it. Every night, a Praetorian tribune came to the emperor's chambers to receive the password for the guard. It was a formality. Routine. The same errand, every night, for years. Cassius Chaerea had a soft voice, high-pitched by Roman standards, the kind of voice that invited comment in a culture obsessed with performed masculinity. Caligula commented. He started giving Chaerea humiliating watchwords instead of ordinary ones. Venus, slang for an unmanned man. Priapus, a fertility god always depicted with an absurdly oversized phallus. One insult from each direction, so there was no way to read it as anything but deliberate. When Chaerea came to kiss the emperor's hand, a standard gesture of respect from an officer to his commander, Caligula would hold it out and twist it into an obscene gesture instead. Every day, for years. To the rest of the court, this looked like harmless cruelty, the kind of casual humiliation Caligula handed out constantly. To senators, to his own family, to men who could do nothing about it. Just another joke at someone's expense, in a palace where everyone had learned to laugh on command. Nobody in that court had bothered to ask what Cassius Chaerea had actually done before he became a Praetorian tribune. In AD 14, the Emperor Augustus died. On the German frontier, 8 legions used the news as an excuse to mutiny, furious over pay, over conditions, over years of service with no discharge in sight. For a few days, armed Roman soldiers controlled the Rhine camps, and their own officers were not safe among them. Some centurions were beaten by the men they had once commanded. A few didn't survive it. A young officer named Cassius Chaerea was there. He drew his sword and forced a path through a crowd of his own mutinous countrymen to reach his commander's side. Not a battle against an enemy, a walk through armed Romans who, that week, might have killed him for wearing the wrong insignia. That same camp, that same week, is where the future emperor got his name. The general Germanicus had brought his toddler son along on campaign, and the boy's mother dressed him in a miniature soldier's uniform, tiny military boots included. The mutinous legions adopted him as their mascot and nicknamed him Caligula, Little Boots. It stuck for the rest of his life. The officer cutting his way through that mob and the small boy those same soldiers were cheering for would end up in the same stretch of corridor 27 years later. One of them carrying a sword, the other the reason for it. 5 years later, in AD 19, it happened again. Unrest broke out among the legions after the death of Germanicus, the empire's most beloved general. Chaerea, once more, cut his way through an armed mob rather than run from it. This was the man Caligula found so laughably unmanly that his voice became a running joke at court. By the time he was mocking Chaerea nightly over a watchword, Caligula, emperor of Rome, commander of its armies, had never personally fought in a single battle in his life. He was insulting the bravery of one of the most battle-tested officers in his own guard, and neither of them had any way of knowing that was the mistake that would end his reign. The insults didn't stop. They compounded. Years of them alongside everything else that had made Caligula, by AD 41, a source of dread even to the men sworn to protect him. The arbitrary executions, the treason trials, the sense that no one close to him was ever truly safe. Chaerea began talking, quietly, to other officers who had their own grievances, to senators tired of living under a man who treated their lives as a form of entertainment. He wasn't alone for long. Cornelius Sabinus, another Praetorian tribune, joined him and agreed to strike alongside him rather than simply stand watch. A senator named Annius Vinicianus, who had reason to fear he was already on Caligula's list of suspected traitors, lent the plot political weight. Even Callistus, one of the emperor's own freedmen and closest attendants, is said to have known what was coming and done nothing to stop it. A conspiracy doesn't announce itself. It accumulates one convinced man at a time until enough of them are willing to act on the same day. They chose the Palatine Games. Days of theater and public spectacle when the emperor's routine was fixed and predictable, and a narrow passage beneath the palace was the one place he reliably walked with a thin escort. Chaerea would not be improvising. He had planned this the way he had once planned a path through a mob of his own soldiers, calmly and with a sword already decided on. January 24th, AD 41. Caligula leaves a rehearsal in the palace theater and takes the underground passage back toward his chambers, a covered corridor, stone-walled, barely wide enough for a handful of men. Torchlight, not daylight. The kind of place where a shout doesn't carry far. Cassius Chaerea is waiting for him. He asks for the watchword, one final time. Then his sword opens the emperor's neck at the collarbone. Caligula doesn't die immediately. He tries to run. Another conspirator, Cornelius Sabinus, cuts him down before he clears the passage. He falls. According to the men who are there, he cries out that he is still alive. The answer is more blades. By the time it's over, the emperor of Rome has been stabbed 30 times, most of them after he was already dead. Nobody wanted to be the only man in that corridor who hadn't struck. It isn't finished with him. Chaerea sends a tribune named Julius Lupus to find Caligula's wife, Caesonia, and their only child, a daughter not yet 2 years old, named Julia Drusilla. Caesonia is killed first. Drusilla, a toddler, bites and kicks at the man who has just murdered her mother. He kills her too. A dynasty's last legitimate heir, erased in the same afternoon because a baby girl could, in theory, have grown up to claim a throne. Word spreads through the palace before any one official has decided what happens next. Caligula's German bodyguard, a separate unit from the Praetorians, fanatically loyal and not in on the plot, goes looking for the killers with swords drawn. In the chaos, they find a senator named Asprenas Calpurnius Serenus with blood on his robe. It's from a sacrifice he'd performed that morning. It doesn't matter. They cut him down on sight. Across the city, in the Senate House, the debate that morning is not about who the next emperor should be. It's about whether Rome should have an emperor at all. The sitting consul, Gnaeus Sentius Saturninus, stands up and gives a speech welcoming the return of liberty, urging the senators around him to hold on to it. For a few hours, men who have wanted the Republic back for 3 generations believe this might actually be the day it happens. While they're still debating, in a different part of the palace, a Praetorian guardsman named Gratus is searching the building for more conspirators or for more threats. It isn't clear which. He finds a middle-aged man hiding behind a curtain, shaking, expecting to be killed. It's Claudius, Caligula's uncle. Claudius had spent his whole life as the family embarrassment. He walked with a limp, spoke with a stutter, and twitched when he was nervous, which was often. His own mother called him a monstrosity that nature had started and never bothered to finish. At dinner, if he fell asleep at the table, guests were encouraged to throw olive pits at him for sport. Caligula himself had mocked his uncle for years, the same habit he'd turned on Chaerea, aimed at a different kind of target. Gratus doesn't kill him, he hails him as emperor. By the time the Senate finishes debating whether to bring back the Republic, the Praetorian Guard has already made the decision for them in a different building with a man nobody in that debate had even considered. Sentius Saturninus doesn't back down easily. He and another senator, Pomponius Secundus, are ready to keep arguing for the old Republic even after word reaches them that the Guard has already chosen Claudius and that the army stands behind their choice. It takes Claudius himself meeting the holdout senators in person to talk them down from a fight they cannot win. Rome's last real chance at restoring the Republic ends not in the Senate House, but in that conversation. Claudius secures his position. He rewards the men who protected him. Cassius Chaerea is not one of them. The man whose sword had ended the terror everyone had lived under for 4 years. The officer who had once cut his way through a mutiny to save Roman lives, and who had now removed the one man threatening every life in that palace, is arrested on Claudius's orders. There's no reward for killing an emperor, even a hated one. A new emperor cannot afford to honor the killing of the last one. It sets a precedent no one on a throne once set, least of all a man who owes that throne entirely to the killing. Chaerea may have believed his service would count for something. He hadn't acted for personal gain. He'd ended a reign of terror at real risk to his own life, the same risk he'd taken twice before on the Rhine. Claudius could not care less what his motive had been. A dead emperor was a dead emperor, and the empire needed to see that killing one still cost a man everything. Chaerea is sentenced to death. He asks for one thing: to be executed with the same sword he used on Caligula. Claudius grants it. Cornelius Sabinus hears what happened to the man who had planned the whole thing beside him. He doesn't wait for his own arrest. He takes his own life rather than survive the man he'd struck down an emperor with. The blade that ended a 4-year reign of terror is the last thing Cassius Chaerea ever feels. Caligula spent years mocking a soldier's voice, certain it made him weak. It didn't. It made him patient. Chaerea killed the man who humiliated him and, in the same afternoon, ended one of the worst reigns in Roman history. The empire he saved had no place left for him in it. Nobody knows what happened to Incitatus after AD 41, the horse a living god had made into a priest. It simply stopped being mentioned, the way an emperor's joke stops mattering the moment the emperor is gone. Somewhere in a palace storeroom, there was a sword that had ended a reign and then ended the man who ended it. Nobody wrote down what happened to that either.